something really special about getting to start a company is that there's no red tape. You just try it, and if it works, you keep going, and if it doesn't work, you stop really quick before you lose your shirt and then move on to the next thing. But no one told me that the stress that would come from like worrying about running out of money and how to build a good company, things like that are much more stressful than actually having to work 36 hours straight, having to like really figure out, why are you doing this? How are you doing it? We're a very different company than the one I started to build and the one that I wanted to build even. And that's okay.
Oh, the woman you just heard from, Christina Stembel, has brought so much joy to my life in the form of flowers. I cannot wait for you guys to hear more from Christina in this week's episode of Things No One Tells You. First, I want to just real quick set the table because I am in the midst of Winter Olympics coverage, which I just want to take a minute to say that one of the coolest things about covering the Olympics, I feel super grateful to even have that opportunity, but it's like, it's a lot of work. You're working often with people that you haven't worked with before. So there's always like, okay, you've got to just kind of bring the best version of yourself, but also to be immersed in these storylines, like all in for 17 straight days, where it's these storylines of like triumph, heartbreak, adversity, and I'm talking about like Lindsey Vonn, all like figure skating, winning gold, like everything. It is like this emotional roller coaster in the best way possible. And it really gives me a lens into humanity, which sounds really maybe weird, but it's true. And I just feel like I hope everyone takes the time to watch some of the Olympics because it is like this lesson in just being good people and character and what it takes. And even if you're not an athlete, it's like these are all the same very relatable things. So I'm saying this because I'm really grateful for that like spotlight to see that. And the guest that I'm introducing you to this week, Christina Stembel, she is the founder of Farmgirl Flowers. And I can't wait for you to hear what she says the thing is that no one's told her on her journey. I think it is, it's something that might not be surprising, but it's definitely helpful. And her business is bootstrapped. She's done it all of it on her own. And I caught wind of it because my husband brought home this box of Farmgirl flowers from the Today Show because she was on the show. And these flowers were like nothing I had seen. They're absolutely like amazing and artistic and wrapped in burlap and just, anyway, I was like, this is really different. This is really awesome. They're gorgeous. And I sort of wanted to know more because there was such a specific style. But the thing that Christina mentioned during the interview, this is not spoiling it, is what it has meant to her and how it has sort of changed her to get a glimpse of that human kindness. And I've never thought about this, but she gets to see all of those notes and letters of people that choose to send flowers. And I just thought, can you imagine if you were able to see that every day and you were looking at people's notes of kindness and love? And anyway, it just really touched me in a way that I thought that is really, really cool. So I'm just going to get right to it. I love this girl. I love her vibe. I love the story behind her business. I hope you learned something from it. Here is Christina Stembel. Christina, I can't thank you enough for joining us here. I am so excited to hear all about the business, all about, how you do it all and the team that you guys have working with you together. Where are you joining us from?
Thanks, Lizzie. I'm excited to be here. I'm here from Washington State, up near Seattle, a little town called Gig Harbor on the water here.
And what are you doing up there? Is that where you said that you're in the midst of creating a farm?
Yes. So I moved from California during COVID, during kind of the great exodus of many states that a lot of people did. I was one of those people. I came up to Washington State. California was just it was tough to do business in, especially as a bootstrapped company of a perishable product that doesn't have really big software margins. It was more of a business decision than a life decision for me. But that kind of goes hand in hand with when you have a company. I came up in 2021, bought a small farm here. We're starting to just kind of dabble in growing some of our own flowers as well. But it's just nice to have kind of an actual farm for Farmgirl Flowers for the first time.
Farmgirl Flowers is, you have and I know you know this, but you have just created such the art of turning into receiving flowers as like just an experience. When you step back and think, okay, Farmgirl Flowers celebrating 15 years, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, 15 years, like, wow. Like certain pictures just go in my mind when I think of that, of, starting it in my dining room and not knowing if it was going to make it, and then trying to pitch over 100 times to investors and getting so many no's and crying in my car so many times. And, so many, working 30 hours straight without any sleep and falling asleep at stoplights, which is really dangerous. And I don't recommend it to people just because you're so tired delivering flowers at 11 o'clock at night on a Valentine's Day. And, just so many things. And then also just people. I just have so many like thoughts of all the people along the way that have helped me build this into what it is. And just so much gratitude, especially our customers, our team and our customers just kind of blow me away by how dedicated and loyal they are. Even when we faced really, really hard times, there's been so many times that I've thought that I don't know if we're going to make it another month, and we pull through. And it's because of our loyal customers, that we do that, and our team that works so hard to do it.
I spent a lot of time also watching some of your segments on the Today Show, and there's one where you created a beautiful tablescape with citrus. And I think that what I've realized is I love certain specific colors with flowers, as I'm sure everyone does, but I love the way that they make me feel when it's a really curated, specific kind of design, but it doesn't feel really over the top. It feels very organic. What do flowers mean to you? I know that sounds like a weird question, but before I get into like really how this all started,
Yep.
obviously this is a gift that you were given.
Thank you, Lizzie. Nobody's ever asked me that question before, and I've been interviewed a lot, so that's a great question.
Thank you.
You know, flowers mean different things to me now than they did when I started out. When I started Farm Girl, I started it because I wanted to start a company, and I knew it would be something creative because my skill in life was making things beautiful. And I didn't want that to be my skill. I wish I could have cured cancer or, something
Oh,
much, greater than just making things pretty. But, when I started Farm Girl, I didn't actually see a whole lot of value in flowers because I didn't like what I was receiving. I didn't like what I would send as a sender. Didn't like what I would receive as a recipient. And so to me, it was just like, can't we do this better? It was more like a business, like, let me solve this problem. But what it's changed into along the way for me is seeing the love behind the flowers, especially as like things get really heavy in life, seeing
yeah.
how many, how much love is sent through flower arrangements, and seeing what the cards say, and seeing how many, it's usually women. That really surprised me. When I started Farm Girl, I thought it was going to be men buying flowers, but 92% of people that buy flowers are women buying for women.
For real? Like that's a real stat?
Real stat. And if you take
Oh,
Valentine's Day out of it, it's probably really close to 100% of the time because
oh
that's the
my
day they all buy for.
God.
Yeah, men don't buy. I think your husband, Craig, might be an anomaly in how much he loves
Oh,
flowers, by the way. So, which I love, by the
we'll take
way,
it.
so
That's
much.
hilarious.
But usually it's women. And I think that's because women know how it feels to receive them. And so
Yeah.
that's why they want all of their loved ones around them, their excuse me, their sisters, their moms, their friends, to feel that same love. And so now flowers mean love to me and mean care and consideration and so many things that I think we need more of in the world right now.
Wow. Do you have specific flowers that you love more than
Of
others,
course.
like favorites?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
What are they?
They change seasonally, and they also change when I get tired of one because we use it too much or something. Um, and I hate to be really cliche, but peonies are still my absolute favorite, even though they're
Yeah.
everybody's favorite, flower. They're very fleeting. They usually the season for, we're trying globally to get them year round. So people are trying to grow them in all different places now. We're growing some. We just put in almost 40,000 plants ourselves as well. So,
It's so exciting.
we're trying. So we're excited about that. But, the season for when you're harvesting them is very short. It's usually a few weeks long, at most 6 weeks long.
Okay.
So it's a very fleeting season, which I think makes them more special because you can't get them all the time. The other
Oh
flower I love
yeah.
is garden rose. It's very traditional. It smells wonderful. They don't have very long vase life, so they're hard to
Mhm.
use as well. So we use a lot of garden-like roses, but true garden roses have a vase life of only a couple days, and so customers would get upset. So I kind of like them even more because I can't use them a little bit. But then there's some flowers that I just don't love, which
Mhm.
this was a good business message or lesson for me because I'm really not a fan of Gerber daisies or sunflowers
Oh,
personally.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, some people love them. I find you're either on the love or hate category with them.
Yeah.
And I don't love them. And so we didn't have a Gerber daisy bouquet on our site for 10 years. For the first 10 years, because I just didn't like them. So I'm like, I'm not using them. If I don't like them, I don't want to design with them.
Good enough.
And then, yeah. And then we had a grower with COVID that was throwing away, hundreds of thousands of dollars of Gerber daisies. So we put a Gerber daisy bouquet up on our site, and it became one of our most popular bouquets.
Oh,
And so I'm like,
yeah.
well, that I was a dummy there, not giving our customers what they wanted. So now we've always had a Gerber daisy bouquet up since.
That is so funny. You know what's interesting is I've realized this about myself, and this is going to sound like a weird story, but ever since I was a kid, my mom has not liked carnations. And I don't know, you know how you just pay
Yep.
attention to things that fall into your brain that your parents have told you along the way. So every time I order an arrangement for a friend, I always feel compelled to say, just no carnations. Like, do you know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't even know where, like, this just came from like using her as a measuring stick as I did for a lot of things. Do you know what I mean? It's the
Absolutely.
most random.
Carnations, they're the Oldsmobile. They're like every
Okay.
mother. They were like overused. They were like your dad's car, that's your mom's flower kind of thing,
Yeah, so I was excited to ask you about that because I
Yeah.
was wondering why did she have such an aversion to them and therefore me? And I get that's exactly it, right? Like they were just so common back
Yes.
in the, is that right?
Yeah, they were so common. They were at every grocery store, and they're also in, used to be in very primary colors, often dyed to be an
Right.
unnatural color. So it just felt a little like startling, even like this Crayola box color that would not be in a natural form is in a natural form,
Right.
right? So everybody, I would say it's the most hated flower. We've tried
Oh, that's
so many
hilarious.
times to try to bring them back because there's all these new varieties that are beautiful. And
Really?
yeah, we call them the workhorse flower too because a carnation can stay alive like if you keep it in like not in hot like in a window with sun and just change the water every day. It can last, a month easily. They're the only flower that can last like a month outside of a cooler. So we call them the workhorse flower. Trying to bring them back because they just have such staying power and they're beautiful and they actually have a scent still, which so few flowers do. But people aren't ready for the Oldsmobile to
What
come
is
back yet.
how does that new variety look? What feels different about it? What makes you
The
say it's
colors.
beautiful?
Yeah, the
Okay.
colors are just, I mean, there's one that looks just like a David Austin gold garden rose to me. And it's, a carnation will cost you 50 cents, a
Yeah.
wholesale, like the big, between 30 and 50 cents. And a garden rose will cost you $2 wholesale. So the difference in price as well is just huge. I mean, it's just, you can get so much more for your money with the carnations. And they'll last a lot longer than the garden rose will last 3 days and the carnation will last 3 weeks. But
Okay.
people don't love them. So I think maybe another 10 years has to pass and then maybe we could try again.
Okay. So you as a kid, you're a girl that grew up on a farm in Indiana, correct? Can you tell me about that and what that life was like?
Yeah, I grew up on a corn and soybean farm. My dad only farmed it for a couple years and then found that you have to have a lot of land for commodity crops. You can't have just a couple hundred acres like we had. So we rented it out to our neighbor, farmed it for us. But I grew up on I don't know 200 and some acres, and big barns and outbuildings, and very far from town, which I thought was horrible at the time because everybody else was going to the community pool and the parks and tennis lessons in the summer, and we were outside doing chores. And now I think it's the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I learned how to work really, really hard. And
Yeah.
if I didn't have that work ethic, there's no way Farmgirl would still be here without it. So I
What
count a
were the
lot of blessings
chores?
for that.
Yeah, what
I
were
mean,
your
now I hear people, I have two stepchildren, so I'm always reading, co-parenting and parenting books and how to be a good step parent books and things. And I'm like, Grit by Angela Duckworth. I'm like, how can I make them grittier? And, like all that.
Oh,
And
that's hilarious.
yeah. And, the chores seem to be, but the chores that they use are like making their bed. And so I'm like, no, that was not our chores. Ours was like, go clean the barn, or, we're going to burn the fence row today, or you're going to mow the lane back to the pond, which is, a half a mile long and on a tractor,
Yes.
They were different types of chores. Or my mom had so many gardens that, now I like work with flower farmers that are like, we have a flower farm, it's half an acre. And I'm like, we had probably an acre of gardens. It's called a garden, not a farm. But I get a little catty that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a farm.
Right. You're like, I know.
Yeah.
Right. But so you grew up with that grit.
Yeah.
And and then so you said that you were someone that you wish that you could have been maybe a doctor or something different, but you found that your skill was making things beautiful. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I didn't go to college. So also another thing with growing up on a farm was, you know, girls didn't, I mean, there wasn't a lot of investment put into girls' education. I had one talk with my parents about it, and they were, my mom was like, well, girls go to college to find a husband, so we don't have that kind of
No.
money. And so it just wasn't even discussed. And so, I had to figure out like what I was going to do. And I had big dreams. I wanted to be an actress. I moved to New York City 2 weeks after I graduated high school. I just had all of these big aspirations. But how I got here was very different than most trajectories to start a business. I didn't come with a fancy pedigree or, working at a lot of, big fancy companies first. I, worked at lots of odd jobs and then would just work my way up. But what I found was I was very good at jobs that had a creative bent to them. So, before starting Farmgirl, I worked at Stanford University, which is very
Mhm.
ironic since I didn't go to college. But, I oversaw departments that did, I started there in a catering department, doing
Okay.
catering for the university. And then I went to alumni relations department, which oversaw, all the events for each specific school. So I would do all the events for the law school and all the programs. And I really excelled at that. I was really good at that. When the economic downturn happened in 2008, the provost office called me in to talk about how I was able to do just as many events with half the budget, because they didn't think it could be possible. And it was just because I was getting really creative. I'd make our own flower arrangements. I'd work out, deals
Wow.
to get like wholesale and all of our wine. I just kind of like that scrappiness and that creativity came
Yeah.
through and allowed me to do it really well. So I always knew that was going to be my something creative. I wanted to start a business, and I would carry a notebook around with me everywhere and come up with like probably had thousands of ideas of businesses. One of and I would turn every girls' night into a focus group where I'd be like, "Hey, Mona, Margarita, what do you think of this company called Pockets? It's iron-on pockets for your suits." And I'd show them. I'd have like a suit pocket. I'm like, take these home and try them. And yeah, I was like that guy with the question marks on his suit that you saw the infomercials for. So, but
Yeah.
all of the ones that I would gravitate to were ones that had creative spin to it.
So the scrappiness, and I think that's a really interesting example. Like example, when you're trying to get wholesale wine, like does that mean that you would just show up on site wherever you needed to meet someone and talk it out, negotiate it? How were you doing that scrappiness?
Yeah, I mean, at Stanford, I would just look at our alumni and see like, well, we have lots of alumni in wine. I could probably easily talk to them about it. So that's where I would
Yeah.
start, and then it was just, you know, I, you know, I got a kind of a poor performance review once, the only one in my entire life, and it was kind of a cross department one from the university at large. It had gave performance reviews to the those positions at each school, and that person didn't know me really well, and I'd gotten rave performance reviews every other time, every company. I'm the hardest worker will just get things done. And that one was negative because she said that the general consensus about me was that I would just forge ahead and not wait for anybody to catch up. And I was like, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I thought that was like a big compliment. She's like, that wasn't a compliment. And I was like, oh, like I thought that was a great thing. So, I think when you're working at a giant company there with all the red tape, it's hard when you're somebody who's very entrepreneurial like I am, that I'm just going to like see that this is a problem and just go tackle that problem and get it done. That's
Yeah.
hard at big companies. And so that's something really special about getting to start a company is that there's no red tape. You just try it. And if it works, you keep going. And if it doesn't work, you stop really quick before you lose your shirt and then move on to the next
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, I don't know if I think I went off on a
Yeah.
tangent there. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I think that's really interesting. And I think also what that makes me think about a little bit is sports, because really what that person I think was talking about in that review was probably communication that they wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe that's the difference. Because right? It's like someone can take care of it and do it. And that's a hard thing in any situation because you're
Mhm.
right. It's like you see a path through, you see a way to do it,
Yep.
and you can get it done.
Yep.
And I think sometimes, right, it's like mastering that art of communication amongst a sports team or
Right.
wherever it is, of course. Like that's something that I would love to dig in with you too and about how you do that. And so to get there, what was the seed that planted Farmgirl Flowers? No pun
Yeah.
intended. I didn't
Yeah.
mean
Yeah. It was actually, it was one of, working at the university, doing the events for the school, I would see how much the flower arrangements cost, which is why I started doing them myself, and saving a ton of money. And so anytime I would see a problem like that, I would business plan it out on the weekends because I was a dork like that. And I was just like, why do flowers cost so much? That's where it started. Like, why do they cost so much? And
yeah.
I started with event flowers and very quickly switched to the e-commerce side because when I looked at how much revenue was generated in that entire industry of flowers, most of it was coming from e-commerce. And that side of the business was made up of four companies, essentially, making all of the money.
Okay.
$3 billion a year coming from four companies, more than 3 billion. And I was like, wait, the other side, the event side, has so many, like hundreds of thousands of people in that side of the business, mostly women on that side, all men on the e-commerce side. That's ironic.
Yeah.
Also, and kind of interesting to kind of dig into where the small, tiny businesses are run by women doing, weddings and events from their garages mainly and calling themselves studio florists. And then, these e-commerce giants were all white men. And yet women were the consumer of flowers. So it very much looked like beauty or fashion to me. And I was like, this is, how it always is. It's like the female consumers are huge. And yet it's men telling them what they want. And none of the women like what they're getting. I'm looking at all the reviews and I'm
Yes.
like, this
Yes.
isn't working. Every time I would send my mom flowers, I'd have to use one of those companies because there wasn't a florist in this little tiny town in Indiana I grew up in. And I would spend an hour trying to sort through the least ugly options online during my lunch hour. I would spend $100 when I thought it was going to be $50. And I would try to send her like an all white bouquet. And then what was delivered to her was like dyed Kelly green daisies. That's a true story, by the way.
Wow.
And I'm just like, that's not what I ordered. These are ugly. These look like they were, $10 at the grocery store and I spent $100 on them. So I looked at it as this is the first idea I had that checked all the boxes where it was creative. So I knew I could do it and I could do it well. It was something I could bootstrap because I lived in San Francisco at the time. That's where I started Farmgirl. And there was a really robust flower market at the time there. And so I could buy small quantities at wholesale
Oh,
prices, which I couldn't have done if I was like still in Indiana or somewhere where that they don't
okay.
have a flower market like that. And I knew I could bootstrap it. I had almost $50,000 at $49,000 saved up, which I thought was so much money back then. And so this was an idea where I knew I wasn't going to be able to go get funding down from Sand Hill Road with no pedigree, no education, nothing, and say, hey, come, give me $1 million to start this company. So I started it with my $49,000, thinking I would raise capital later, but was never able to. And I think that's also a huge blessing for us now.
Oh, really? Why?
Because honestly, I don't think we'd be here if we had funding. I think, there's not a lot of profit in perishable product.
Mhm.
And so people in our industry have to like tout that they're actually technology or marketing companies that just happen to sell flowers because the multiples
Okay.
aren't great. If I was an investor, I probably wouldn't want to invest in flowers either, to be honest. It took me a long time to get there because I was so mad that all of our counterparts that were owned by men were able to get, $100 million and up on investments and we were not able to. So
Yeah.
there's definitely that was involved in it. And nobody will ever convince me it's not part of it because we were doing really, really well and not able to even raise $1 million. But now I get to make exactly the decision that's right for the company. And I can look further down the road than like the next quarterly report. I don't have investors breathing down my neck telling me they need to, get their investment out with a 7 to 10x return in a short amount of time. I've
Yeah.
never been able to buy a farm and grow flowers and things like that take a lot of capital, ahead of time. We're investing a lot that we won't get out for 5 years, but when we do, it's going to be worth it probably. But it just, I'll let you know in a couple of years, but I get to make decisions that are just focused more than on just the bottom line and what the investors want. And I'm really grateful for that.
So when you took that 49,000, what happened next?
Yeah, I quit my job at Stanford when everybody thought I was crazy. And I thought it would take me a month to get a website up. I had a friend who made my first website for me. Took a couple months. I quit in June and launched in November. So it took longer than I thought. And then I just taught myself how to make a flower arrangement that I would want to receive. So to your point earlier, I wanted it to look like it was just picked from the garden. I wanted something that wasn't too fussy or too roundy moundy or didn't look
Uh-huh.
natural. I wanted to just look like, someone had just picked it from the garden for you. And I went through a lot of iterations. The first product I launched with was just one daily arrangement. You didn't have any choice on size. We had one bouquet on our site, and that was it. And found out that
Wow.
people, yeah, like saw that people were buying it for themselves instead of a gift. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why are they buying it for themselves? We're supposed to be in the gifting space.
And
So I
how
did a
did you
little,
know that? Because they weren't filling out a card or
yeah, it was going to the same, like the billing address and the recipient address were the same. And it's
got
like,
it. Okay,
Rachel sending
okay.
to Rachel and stuff. And I'm like, Rachel, why are you sending to yourself? And so I did a little focus group with 10 people at a little wine bar on Polk Street in San Francisco and just asked them, people that had bought more than two or more times from me, because I think we'd only been in business 6 months when I did this, and asked them, like, why are you buying flowers for yourself? And they gave me great intel. They were like, because you only have one size and it's really small. Like, I don't want to send that as a gift. I want to send something bigger as a gift, but I love to have
Wow.
this just on my table at home. So I went and immediately, I think 3 days later, I launched sizes, had much bigger sizes on our site. Then we added plants. That was another thing people said they wanted to have more diversity, added vases, plants, things like that. And then just kept growing from there.
Did you always from the beginning have the burlap wrap? Because that's one of the things if people have not received this, when you get your Farmgirl Flowers, it comes out of this really nice box also, but that has
Thanks.
this beautiful burlap wrap with a ribbon tied around it.
Yeah, it did. Actually, I've tried to get rid of the burlap a couple times since because I'm like, okay,
Really?
it's been 15 years now. And it started out where it was amazing. I love this part of the story. I contacted coffee roasters in San Francisco to see if they would let me buy their burlap sacks. I originally was thinking of potato sacks from Indiana. So I was like, they don't
Oh,
have those in California. So then I was like, coffee, it comes in burlap sacks. Because really it was about like it being biodegradable,
okay.
upcycled, better for the environment. We save, a ton of plastic every year, over a ton of plastic every year by using it instead of the cellophane wrap that comes on most flowers.
Nice. Got it.
Yeah, so it was better for the environment. And Ritual Roasters, which is owned by a woman in San Francisco, they got back to me and they said, you could just have it. We like that it's going to a good place. And so every Thursday I'd go there with my old, you know, Nissan Xterra that had 200,000 miles on it. And I'd load up the back of it with these burlap sacks. And then I would go and I'd cut them like with these big giant scissors till my hands would bleed, into pieces. And then we got bigger. And then we got, Pete's Coffee would donate and some other, bigger ones. And then
Wow.
those companies stopped donating, probably for legal reasons, which I totally understand because there tends to be legal stuff with everything that they have to
Yeah.
you have to stop doing. So we couldn't get the burlap anymore, and so we had to start buying burlap, and that defeats the whole purpose. They're not reused coffee sacks anymore.
Right.
They're which I love. The burlap is nice that it's biodegradable, but I was like, okay, since we're not actually upcycling, is there something else we can do differently?
Mhm.
But every time we try to do something else, our customers get really upset. So we come right back to the burlap. We're like, okay, we'll keep the burlap. People love it. So
Oh, that's an interesting one. It's like, how can you work around that? Like, don't you think like there's got to be
mhm.
some sort of
Yeah,
group?
if anybody is at Pete's or Starbucks listening or anyone that wants to donate some burlap to us, we will figure out how to get it to us and get it cut and
I
everything.
mean, it
So
seems
let me
like a
know.
natural collab. Like, I mean, no, that's an awesome part of the story. So then were you just experimenting with some of those flowers that you described at the farmer's market, but also in just seeing what you liked that looked the way that you described it?
Yeah, I bought some, I went to the library and and got on loan some books, and I didn't love all of the things in it, so I just stopped looking at other people's and just came up with my own. And the early years are all over the place. Like I was definitely learning on the job to get to where we are now. There was also a lot of engineering that went into it when we started shipping flowers because shipping took a lot
Oh,
longer. Yeah, so now we ship to the lower 48, and I thought I'd be able to get that going in like a year, but it took me 5 years to get that going because it is really expensive to ship flowers.
oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Five
really,
years?
5 years. Yeah, and the subsidies are huge. I mean, when we started, it was like 20 a day that we could ship. And then we went up to 40 a day because we're subsidizing, each box would cost us, I think at that time it was like $40 a box, but we're charging 25. And so we have
Okay.
to pay $15 have to come out of the flower cost, but you don't have that much to play with perishable product. Like, the giant companies, make, 5-6% net margins on, I mean, this is not software margins here. These are like tiny margins to try to, nobody makes over 10% net. So you don't have a lot of subsidy that you can afford. You can't, take from the flowers or anywhere else because everything is expensive with perishable product. You have to rush the shipments in, rush them out. You want to get them in your customers' hands, as quickly as possible so they'll last longer for you. We don't want them in a cooler longer for us. We want them, in your house longer. So everything's just expensive. So yeah, it took a long time to be able to afford it until I could afford to subsidize each box. And we still subsidize each box that goes out. I thought by now we wouldn't have to,
Yeah.
but shipping is just really, really expensive, which makes sense. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it.
When did you hire your first employee?
I hired my first employee when moved it out of my apartment in 2012. And yeah, I was just talking to our payroll provider that we use. I remember they came out to the flower market to set me up on a payroll system so I could do everything legally and make sure that from the start I had all my employees on a payroll system. It was so great. It's Gusto if anybody's looking for a great payroll system. They're awesome. The two founders actually came and set it up at the flower mart for me. Yeah, and then just have bootstrapped it, meaning like when we have profit, we just invest that back into the company.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any profit for 10 years, which is just crazy. Like I almost gave up at year 9 because I was just like, this is crazy. We did $34 million in revenue and $36,000 in profit. And I was paying myself $60,000 a year. I was like, and I'm working 100-hour weeks minimum, never taking a day off, I'm like, this is too much, and gave myself one more year and then COVID happened. And then it was just like, okay, just sprint and all speeds, ahead and get more production set up and all those things. So COVID just kind of changed everything. And because of the new distribution process we came up with through COVID, it actually made us more profitable. And so we can actually stay in business longer, which is great.
You mean because people were sending flowers?
Well, 2020 was it was a boon year for us, which I hate saying because it was such a horrible year for everyone.
Yeah.
But people were sending flowers because they couldn't be with people
Right.
that they loved. But also we had to change how we did business. We couldn't make everything in one warehouse any longer like we did until then.
Okay.
So we had to diversify it, spread it out, which gets us closer to the end consumer. So shipping rates are less. We make them more places. So if one gets shut down, we still can have production other places. Or, something comes in, botrytis or some kind of, disease on a flower, we have somewhere else to, to send those orders. So we just became it's safer how we do business now. And it also became more profitable because of that distribution model. So some good things came out of all the hard work during COVID. We were able to figure out some things to make us a better and financially healthier company.
So what would you say is the thing no one tells you that means the most to you from the journey that you've been on?
That's a good question too. You have great questions, Lindsay.
Oh.
Yeah. I think like I'd heard how hard it would be, like, and I expected how many hours it would be and just how physically and mentally demanding everything would be. But no one told me that the stress that would come from like worrying about running out of money and how to build a good company and, kind of more like things like that are much more stressful than actually having to work 36 hours straight, having to like really figure out, why are you doing this? How are you doing it? We're a very different company than the one I started to build and the one that I wanted to build even. And that's okay. But that's been just a really big journey to get there. And also understanding that just in business, there's not a lot of fairness. And I am a right fighter to the nth degree. Like I just will fight for what's right. And
Girl. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, put on those boots and let's go, but you can't do that in business. You have to, do things you don't want to do morally. And that's hard for me. That's, I don't have to like do things that hurt people, but I have to do things that kind of well, essentially, I guess do like there's going to be lawsuits that aren't fair that you just have to settle because that's what you have to do to be in business. And I'm someone who'll be like, I want to fight them because it's wrong. And then it's like,
Right.
okay, but you're going to spend 100 times the amount fighting, and then that hurts your team members worse because you have the money to pay them better, you know? So yeah, you got to make concessions that I was never, nobody ever told me that was the reality of running a business.
When did you come up with the name?
Um, Before I started it, so in 2019, when I was, or early 2020, or 2000, I mean 9 or 10, sorry. Before I quit my job at Stanford, I actually came up with the name. I had gone through so many different names, probably, I don't know, 500 names to try to figure out what to call it.
500? Oh my God.
Probably. There's just to find anything
Yeah.
that had the URL open was almost impossible, even back in 2009 and 2010, which
Yeah.
is crazy. Yeah. So, yeah,
And then
came up.
was it just like, this is it? That's it. When you,
I think so. I was concerned about it because I didn't want it to be like considered too rustic or like not, I was like, we want to have really nice flowers. We want to use like better flowers. We want to design them better. So I want it to be appealing to everybody. So I was a little concerned about it like being too polarizing like I don't want something that's like a farm. I want something like fancy.
right,
So
right.
yeah, I was worried about that. But I did ask, like, I had a focus group of friends in those early days that I would ask a lot of questions to, and they all loved Farm Girl. And it was a nickname of mine from long ago. So it was kind of fitting too. So
People called you Farm Girl?
yeah, yeah. Back in New York, when I moved to New
Love
York
it.
City, that was my friends in New York called me Farm Girl. So
Oh, that's so fun. I love
yeah.
that. So when you talk about the thing that no one told you about being stressed about those pieces of it, um, was there a moment that you initially were like, okay, we're good? Like, in knowing that you had the confidence to really push through, regardless of how bootstrapping it was, like, what was that measuring stick for you?
Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a point where I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I've made it. Like, because I know too well that something could come along and put us out of business tomorrow. Like the pandemic taught me that, like when we were shut down on March 16th, like everybody else in the world, but we had one major fulfillment center in the US and that got shut down. I was like, we have all these orders in the system. I have nowhere to ship them from. I have this little tiny distribution center in
Yeah.
Ecuador that we just set up 2 months ago. And we're going to have to train them on WhatsApp, how to do it. I mean, it was just like, I sat on my couch that day and I just, after laying off, or furloughing, which ended up needing to be a layoff, 200 people, in a parking lot with translators. I mean, it was horrible. It was just a horrible thing. And then to be like, okay, 10 years of my life is now going down the drain. Like, I turned off all my credit cards immediately. I'm like, I don't know how much longer we can even stay in business. We still have to pay rent. We still have to do all these things. How are we going to do this? And I just sat on my couch and I was like, cried a little. And then I went for a walk. I lived on the ocean in California and I just went for a walk there. And I just had this resolve during that walk where I was like, you know what? If I'm going to have to go out of business and claim bankruptcy anyway, then if I have to claim bankruptcy with $1 million or $2 million, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm still having to claim bankruptcy and go out of business. So I'm just going to give it everything I've got. I'm just going to and I thought I'd given it all I'd gotten before, and it was nothing compared to 2020, like nothing. And so I think that was the moment where it's not like I knew that I was going to make it because I had no idea. But now on the other side of that, I look back to that moment and I'm like, if I could make it through 2020, I can get through just about anything. And while it might be us going out of business, I can get through it at least. Like, we could have another pandemic. We'd have I mean, they're I don't even want to say all the worst
Yeah.
scenarios that could happen that ended up in a lawsuit that's too big for our company to absorb. And, we're bootstrapped. I don't have money trees growing in the backyard. I don't have a huge, cachet of private equity or venture capitalists that I can go to for more money or anything. It just is what it is. And if I run out of money, we go out of business. And I've done all the things I need to do to make sure that we're as safe as we possibly can be. But there's still so many things that could happen that I will have no control over, that I know I need to be realistic. And I think that's every business owner's responsibility to their, to their teams to know that, so they don't ever get too I don't know, too comfortable, you know?
Mhm.
It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me working really hard.
And when you talk about your team, I love that your team is mostly or all women. Is
Not
it?
all. We have some wonderful men that work for us too, but we are predominant. We're over, I think we're
Yeah.
75% female, and I love that so much. And when
Yeah.
people will try to spin it kind of negatively, I'm just like, oh no, don't do that. There's not been a place at the table for women for so long. We're not going to go there, So
I think it's amazing. And I
yeah,
also love how you describe your team as a high performance sports team, not as a family. You don't use that to
yes.
describe it. Can you talk a little bit about that? I love that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I thought you would with your background. So I correct people all the time with this too. And
Mhm.
people will say it a lot because we are a very close team. But I stop them every time I hear this because it's so important to me that we do not think we're a family. There's only a few family members of mine that I would even hire. So for what we do,
Yeah.
let's think about that. Like you can't treat your family the same way that you treat, team members. You can't, like yeah, a family member's not performing, you still love them and you keep them around. But if somebody is not performing at work, it's not fair to the rest of the team to have someone bring you down. Just like any sports team, you wouldn't keep somebody in a game that's doing
Yeah.
horribly, right?
Right.
Just because you love them, you know, that's not fair to the rest of the team. And so I actually stole that from Netflix. Culture Deck is so great. We created our own
Okay.
culture deck, kind of based. We use that in the One Madison Park one as examples. They both have great culture decks if people want to go see how really amazing companies lead.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We created ours based on that and came up with our core values. And it's like things like being a workhorse in a sea of unicorns, or gristle, like grit and hustle together, and being competent and kind and things like that. They're just really important to us.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so we just, I want us all to perform like we're a high performing sports team, not like we're a family unit that can sit around and gossip and complain and not get things done because Sally over here is something's going on with her. And like I want us to all be like, okay, we all have to show up, we all have to like, and even if you're on the bench, you're not like the don't think you're the most valuable player, you're still really important. And so everybody on our team is really, really important. And we run very leaner than any company I know. Everybody wears a lot of hats, and we like it that way. It keeps us really, really good on whatever court we're on.
That's a lot of work, right?
Yeah,
For one
yeah.
person. It's funny because I think a couple different analogies in sports that certainly apply. One of them is when you hear people talk often about really great coaches, they talk about how they can find their way to connect and get through to and really motivate all different types of athletes, like that's a really powerful gift. And then also the fact that teams have to really, like you said, it's like you have to constantly be working together, but you can have that camaraderie
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, like camaraderie, chemistry. But you're right, it doesn't have to be a family,
Nope.
but
Nope.
yeah.
But the best teams do have great camaraderie, like you said, right? Like it's
Yes.
not like saying it's less than a family. Like a lot of team members probably want to hang out with each other more than they would want to hang out with their family. So it's not a
Yeah.
bad thing. It's a great thing, actually. It means that you're going to give your best for the rest of your team.
And oftentimes it's what you said about people, that a leader being like making the person that has maybe a job that's perceived as a lesser job in the totem pole, making that person feel just as validated and important and seen as the person that's like their right hand man. I think that's so
Absolutely.
critical. Yeah. Are there times that gets tough, like being in the leadership position that you're in terms of just navigating the human connection of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing is letting people go that aren't a good fit, honestly. I think,
Yeah.
every book on leadership that I'd read, before starting Farmgirl and even after was like, the things that CEOs and founders wish they had known and done earlier was always to fire faster. And I really took that to
Wow.
heart. Yeah, people, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't think I'm really great out there because it hasn't worked out for them at our company. And I'm okay with that because in order to be a good leader for your sports team, you need to make sure that everybody's a good fit for that team. And it's
Mhm.
not always a good fit. It's not always for both, for us or for them. And, I really believe that people want to do well. And if it's not a good fit for them to do well at your company, you should let them go do well somewhere else with one that's more aligned with what they're looking for. So I do fire fast, and that's really hard. It's not like fun. It's not what you want to do. It's not, I'm a very, like, coming from a farm in the Midwest, we didn't deal with conflict well. It was just like, go to your rooms until you come out and give me nice, like we don't talk about things like, I have to learn to be okay with conflict and to, sit in my stomach ache for a while,
Yes, yes.
because it's the right thing to do for the team, even though it's really, really hard because you never want to let people down.
Yeah, that's really fascinating too. How would you describe the culture of Farmgirl
Yeah.
Flowers and what you guys want it to be?
I think we have a culture of integrity. It's something I realized this a couple of weeks ago. It's like every person on our team has such high integrity. I never have to worry, like nobody would have to worry that like, someone's not doing their job, or like, that if all of the leadership was gone, would the other team members like still come in and do their work really well? Absolutely. Everybody has really high integrity and wants to
Mhm.
do a good job, like genuinely wants to do a good job. They care tremendously for themselves and for each other and for the company. And I think that's the best thing you can have on your team.
Do you like in terms of the bootstrapping culture, what would be the advice that you would give to someone who's maybe similar to where you were once, where they have an idea, they have something they're really passionate about that they want to start, but they're sort of in that place where it's like, I've got this chunk of change. Maybe they're thinking about investing. Maybe they're just wondering what the options are. But what would you tell them about what you've learned about the bootstrapping piece of it?
I think bootstrapping is a great option, and nobody talks about it because it's not the sexy story that makes the cover of every business magazine.
Mhm.
I think about the reason why you're building your company, and if it's because you have to get the cover of that magazine, which was truly one of the goals I had as well. So I'm not here to judge that. I had to get over that. Then bootstrapping is going to be hard because you're never going to get quickly. If you have a great idea, someone's going to come and steal it with a lot of investment behind them, and they're going to get bigger than you. And that's just the way it is. That's why people get investment, right? But if you're doing it because you really want the learning of starting a company and to have that journey and get to learn all the things about it, which is what I wanted. I wanted to, start and scale a business. I wanted to know what that felt like. I wanted to be able to prove to myself that I could do it. And probably want to prove to other people a little bit too, which is not great, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
There's just kind of this like when you've been underestimated a lot in life, you're just like, I want to show people that I'm capable. But that learning and that journey, if that's why you want to start a company, or I hear a lot of people want to start companies because and they want to be small. They want the flexibility and things like that they don't have with a full-time job somewhere else. Just know what your outcome is before you start.
Okay.
Know what the possibility is before you start. Like if you want to start a company and you want it to just spin off enough for you to live on, see what other companies are doing before you start with that. Or if you want a company that's going to be $1 billion company, like I started off my company wanting it to be, know that I would have had to get investment for that. There's no way for me to get there bootstrapped. There's just not. The amount of money we would need to spend on marketing to get there, we will never have. And so if that was my only goal starting out, I wouldn't have started this at all. But if my goal was like, I also just want to see all the stages of scaling a company, then bootstrapping is a great thing. And you actually can make a lot more money bootstrapping than a lot of people make with companies that have a lot of investment, and nobody talks about that
Mhm.
because again, it's not going to make the magazines because you're looking at numbers that are small medium businesses instead of being giant companies where you own 2% of your company at the end of the road.
I mean, and isn't that changing for you now? Because you might not have been making the magazines, but you're making the Today Show. I mean, you're on there
Yeah.
with your product in very big ways, in other places as well.
Yeah, I mean, I still have to pinch myself. We're so fortunate that, I mean, the Today Show's so kind to us. And I mean, your husband's so kind. They're just so
Oh,
amazing
yeah.
to care about a small company like us and want to, support us that way as well. I mean, most companies in our industry are paying for lots of placements and things. And we've been very fortunate to have so much in the media that actually still cares about telling good stories. And we do have a story. I mean, like 15 years of bootstrapping this is a very long trajectory, and for being able to do this, and we have a story, and it's a good story.
What are you most excited about with that story?
I'm most excited about what's next. I love that we get to keep recreating like who we are and what we want to do. I'm really excited about having a farm quarters in Washington where we're all back in person, and we get to work. COVID was so hard working remote in a creative industry. I think that, I wanted to think that it could be done, but it just couldn't be done well. And I'm so like, it's invigorating getting to work with people in person again, in the creative space, and getting to like collaborate and come up with better ideas. And so I'm excited about where we're going to go in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's awesome. We were at the Rose Parade and got to see some behind the scenes on how they do the floats. And when
Yeah.
we walked into two of the warehouses, and they just had these flowers that were they were all individual, in those little, what do you call them? The water, where it's
Oh, the
like
water tubes.
those.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was a sight that when you walk in, I was like, I've never seen this before. And it's just so amazing. And there's just something that feels so beautiful and organic about all of it. Anyway, that was just really cool.
It does
Um,
help your mental health. Flowers do help your mental health. It's been
I
proven.
believe that is
Yeah,
proven.
it's totally been proven. And I feel that way every time I'm surrounded by flowers. I'm like, it's just, how can you not be happy? You know?
Do you talk to your flowers?
I talk to
I talk to
flowers, my dog. I talk to everything. I'm probably that person that's a little, you know, I even answer sometimes.
I love it. And I wanted to ask you about saying that working in your business is sometimes just as important as working for. Am I getting that right? What
Yeah,
did you?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like so many people told me early on, like you're like, I'm in a CEO group and I heard this a lot. Like you're too in your business. Like you shouldn't be working in your business like that. You should be
Oh,
working on
right,
your
right, right.
business. Yeah, you need to be thinking up here, not down here, and all this stuff. And I'm like, do you know how much great thinking I have when I'm in the business and then figuring out all the things that aren't working that I need to change and do better? Like if I'm not in the business, I'm not going to know that. It's
Yeah.
I disagree with that. And I think there's finally now more talk. Airbnb founders have been talking about like small teams and things like that. Like I think the doers are the people that are going to know how best to do. And so stay being a
Yeah.
doer, That's what I think. I mean, they're calling it founder mode and stuff. And I'm like, we have to put fancy words on just like doing the work.
It's funny. I think that's something that's really relative to in all industries. It certainly is relative in ours. Like in the way that I see that is, there's sort of a trajectory when you're coming up, even in broadcasting, and the way it used to be. Now it's very different with streaming, but it's like it used to be. Maybe you start out and you're reporting, then you're anchoring, and you're getting to this like hosting situation, and all of that is great. But what you learn is like, I am actually so much more lit up by the opportunities that I have where I can do the reporting that feeds into the hosting. And sometimes in the past that has been frowned upon at different places, being like, well, no, it's very separate, but does that make sense?
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely makes sense. Like you're like, but this is the part where it's like good, like, and
Right. Like
it
going
actually
and
will make me
shoot
better
around.
here.
Yes,
Yeah.
to talk to a player and actually,
Yeah.
even if that's not on camera, but to get that one-on-one connection. So then later I actually have sort of a basis and a confidence when I'm explaining what that story is. I think that's something that no one really tells you and talks about. And you have to fight for that and just figure out how you are going to do that, not step on toes and
Yep.
just do you know?
Yep. Yeah. That makes
Okay.
complete
So
sense.
we just talked about working for it, and now your husband is kind of working for it. I did want to ask before we go. So you got married in August.
Yep.
Tell me, like, how'd you meet him? And what's
Yeah.
his name? We should get that up.
Yeah. Keith.
Yes.
He's wonderful. Keith Grossman. I met him through a flower friend, a very ironic, weird story. My mom was coming to visit me up here in Washington, and I was like, what am I going to do with her? Like my mom's a doer too. And I'm like, I got to keep her busy. She's the farm mom. So, I called a friend, we're going to meet her for dinner. And she's like, oh, but I'm hosting a flower crown making workshop, before that. Why didn't you bring her to that? And I was like,
Oh,
on a Saturday though, like the last thing I really want to do is flowers, honestly. But I was like, okay, my mom's going to enjoy this. So I took my mom to the flower crown making workshop, and it was at this really wonderful woman named Sandy at her house, in Woodinville up here. She has a small flower farm there, and just lovely, wonderful woman. And she emailed me a couple days after that and just said like, hey, I never do this, but my son-in-law's best friend is back in the dating game, and I think he's from the Midwest, you're from the Midwest, I think you guys would really hit it off. And I was like, what? And I was
yeah.
my first response was gonna be like, no, But I was like, you know what? I'm new to the area. It's always good to have friends anyway. So I said, sure, why not? And the rest is history. We got married a couple of years later, just got married, last August, and have been, and he then got into he has a small business of his own. I feel a little bad. I probably pull him to ours more than his.
Okay.
But yeah, he's helping with all of our farm operations. So he grew up working on a dairy farm
I
and has
love
a lot of that
that.
experience. So it's just perfect. And super hard worker comes in all in mud and stuff. Like, this is like full circle Indiana, farm.
Oh,
I never thought I'd be
wow.
here,
So when you
but I
first
love
met
it.
him, when you guys went out the first time, what was your reaction?
And my reaction was that he was really nice, but probably like would be friends only. And I was wrong. But I do love
Oh.
the first date was so funny where we had done a Capital One commercial and we were, two small business owners talking a lot of business. And he's like, oh, I have the best hack for you. I don't like, just, I don't know if you know this, but Capital One has a cashback card that's 2% off everything. And that's how you can, pay yourself and all that through this cashback. And I thought he was like, joke. I thought he was like kind of just making fun of me because I was in that commercial, the
He
like,
didn't
what's in
know.
your wallet? And he had no idea, none. He was clueless. So I was like looking at him across the table, like, is he being rude right now? I don't know. But he was just clueless and giving me a good, colleague hack.
Oh, that's so funny. What's his small business?
He has a little business, small pet vaccine, mobile pet vaccine clinic business called Good Neighbor Vet. It's up here in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, wow. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That's
So we
amazing.
have, puppies and peonies basically is what we have.
I love it. I'm going to come visit the farm. I can't wait.
Please do. I want to,
Please. I'm going to drag
please,
Melvin. Well,
yes.
because,
Yes,
okay,
bring your
the trick.
kids. They would love it. We've got like all kinds of farm stuff and excavators and everything. They'd love
Oh my
it.
God. One of my dreams is that I've always been intrigued by donkey farms. And I know that sounds like the weirdest thing. So I'm not going to talk anymore about that. But I think that, um, no, and just to bring it full circle, it's funny because I think my husband brought home a box of them or somehow brought home flowers that were at the show after you had come on the first time. And I was like, this is absolutely, these are so beautiful. So I just did want to say that what's so cool is like when he brought them that day and they were there from what had been on the show, it's like really when you do get those boxes, it is always exciting. Like it always seemed like because you're just like, okay, what's in here? But it's
Yeah.
really, you guys have really nailed like the aesthetic, just creative vibe. And I think it's really, I love to not know stuff. Like we did not find out what if our, kids were gonna be boy or girl. I know that people feel really divided about that, but like so I really get a lot of satisfaction being like, what's in the box?
I love that.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
Love it.
So and
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you made them
Thank you.
bigger because I love the
Thank
big
you. Yeah.
size because they are.
Good.
Yeah. Um, thank you so much, Christina. It's so
No,
great to
thank
talk to
you.
you and hear your story. And I think there's so much in it that can be so relatable and also helpful for others. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we say
I don't
goodbye?
think so. You had really great questions. Thank you for
Oh,
that. They were
thank
really
you.
great. Yeah.
No.
And I would love to have you come to the farm. So please do.
Oh, thank you. I would
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And good luck with everything. And I know that
Thank you.
we'll see you down the road soon, but just best of luck with keeping it
That
all
sounds
going.
good.
I love Christina's story, and I just think there's so much in there that is applicable to so many different, types of people, whether you are in the workforce, whether you are not, if you have an idea that you're percolating on. I love her in-depth sort of explanation of the bootstrapping, because even here on Things No One Tells You, we've heard very opposite examples of that, but we have heard between her and Elliot Buttleman, it's like that drive, that need to really show up and just work your butt off, and how surprising that is. I always think that that's a lesson that is like, okay, take note. Shameless plug, not shameless because I'm the one saying it, but for Christina, just go to her website, Farmgirl Flowers. It is amazing, and there are so many different options there. So anyway, check that out. We will include all of that information in our show notes, so you can find show notes, things about the episode, in depth, just thoughts on lindsaycc.com. And as always, if you liked this episode, if you're liking what you're hearing or watching, please like and subscribe. And maybe the best way to support is to share an episode with a friend. So anyway, thank you for listening and watching to Things No One Tells You, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for joining me. I can't wait to see you back here next week. Please don't forget, follow and subscribe to Things No One Tells You. And of course, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to leave a 5-star review because that's really what helps people get more listeners. We would love to grow this community. We are so grateful that you're a part of it. See you next time.